The mule collapsed just outside the saloon, dust curling up in lazy swirls as its knees buckled and the half-torn sack slumped against its ribs. The woman didn't flinch. She adjusted her sun hat, stepped over the carcass, and dragged the sack up the creaking porch boards. Inside, the piano stopped mid-note. Chairs scraped. Cards dropped. She moved through the saloon like a shadow, gloved hands steady, boots silent. Her dress was plain, faded by sun and journey, and her veil hung like funeral cloth. No one knew her name. No one asked. Behind the bar, Harlan, the owner, leaned back, tried to look disinterested. Room's $2 a week. Cash only. No noise, no trouble. The woman didn't answer, just reached into her skirt, laid 2 silver coins on the counter, and turned toward the stairwell. A young ranch hand muttered under his breath near the fireplace. "Ain't she the one from the Callahan place? Out by Dry Creek." His friend leaned in. "That whole ranch got burned to hell. They said Kane's boys left nothing but smoke and bones." Harlan hushed them with a look. She paused on the stairs, but didn't turn, just kept climbing. The room above the saloon creaked with every step, but she moved like someone who knew exactly where the softboards were. The window faced west, over the chapel and the jailhouse, where Sheriff Danton stood, smoking beneath the overhang. He watched her through the dust like a man waiting for a storm he didn't want. That night, lightning blinked somewhere over the ridge. She sat by the oil lamp, mending a tear in the sack's edge with slow, careful stitches. When the wind rattled the pane, she didn't look up. A scream echoed from outside. A bar brawl? Maybe, or a drunk falling off his horse. Below, boots thundered across the wooden floor. Chairs toppled. Laughter followed. She didn't move. Until a knock. 3 raps. Not urgent. Not polite. She opened the door to see a child, maybe 10, holding his bleeding hand in the other. "My pa's out cold. Can you help?" She knelt, unbuttoned a pouch sewn into the sack, and drew out a strip of cloth, alcohol, and a tin of salve. Her gloves stayed on, but her movements were surgical, silent, like a field medic. The boy watched her wrap and knot the cloth with practiced fingers. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. She didn't answer, just closed the tin and stood. He stared up at her veil, at the shape of the face behind it. "Are you a nurse?" She stared down. "No." "Then what are you?" A long pause, a shift in the wind, and then, "Sleeping," she said, and shut the door. Below, thunder rolled over the horizon. Sheriff Danton lit another match. Harlan bolted his door, and far out in the hills, a fire glowed beneath the stars. The Kane brothers weren't all dead, but some of their boots were missing. The sack hit the porch with a muffled thud. Dust rose around it like breath from the grave. Tom Mathers stepped out onto the stoop, wiping grease from his hands. He squinted at the shape hunched in the midday sun. The widow, black veil drawn, gloves clinging to her wrists like old sins. "Ma'am," he said, guarded, "you look like hell." She didn't reply, just nudged the sack forward with the toe of her boot. Mathers looked down. It wasn't full of tools or feed or clothes. It was heavier. He knelt, tugged at the knotted twine, then hesitated. "Please," she said softly, voice dry as a mesquite branch. "Take them off." His hands moved on their own. The sack opened. Boots. 6 pairs. Charred leather, half-melted soles. Ash smeared across scorched stitching. One still held a foot bone. The rest had been burned clean through. Mathers recoiled. "Sweet mother of..." "Came men," she said. He stared at her. "Where?" Snake Jaw Gulch. "Over 3 nights." He swallowed hard, eyes narrowing on the sack, then back to her. 6 men. "That gulch is near impassable without cover." She said nothing. He looked to her gloves, to the long rifle slung behind her shoulder, wrapped in canvas, to the thin line of blood drying on her sleeve. "You ain't just grieving," he muttered. "You're hunting. They butcher my husband, burned the ranch, buried him with nothing but smoke." He nodded slowly, stepping back. "And you think this makes it right?" She met his eyes. "No, but it makes it balanced." Mathers dragged the sack inside, laid the boots out one by one across his barn floor. Each pair faced west. Each bore scars unique to the Kane gang. A snake-stamped heel, a spur with silver inlay, a torn lace wrapped with rawhide. He looked up. One pair's missing. She nodded. Eli. Mathers's hands trembled slightly. The worst of them. He's coming. When? Soon. She stepped into the barn's half-light. The sun caught her veil, revealing just the edge of her jaw, bruised, faintly scarred. Her hands clutched a map, marked in red ink. Help me, she said. Mathers stared at her for a long moment. I gave up killing. I didn't ask you to shoot. He frowned. Then what? She dropped the sack at his feet again. Bury them. They were devils, but still men. No one else will. Mathers nodded once, slow. All right. As she turned to leave, he called after her. You army. She paused. Cavalry, he guessed. Field medic? Sharpshooter? She didn't look back. Just said, I was a wife. And walked into the heat shimmer, vanishing down the trail as thunder rumbled low and distant. Back in the barn, Mathers laid the last boot in line. Each one pointed west, toward justice or vengeance. Eli Kane rode through Red Vulture Canyon with 3 men and 1 eye on the cliffs. Wind shrieked down the gulch like a dying thing. The sun cut jagged shadows through the rock, and the walls seemed to whisper his name. Eli didn't spook easy, not in 30 years, not through raids, lynchings, or lawmen. But this was different. He gritted his teeth. Where's Colby? No one answered. Colby had ridden ahead at dawn. Never came back. Eli turned in his saddle, eyes flicking to Rude Sam and Haskins. Both looked jumpy, rifles clutched too tight. Sweat pooled at their collars despite the chill. A crow shrieked above them. Eli spat. She's just a woman. Sam muttered. Tell that to the 6 we ain't buried. Eli's jaw flexed. She's a ghost story. A widow in black. That's all. Then why we riding scared? A low growl rolled through the canyon. Not thunder. Not quite. Eli yanked his rifle from the scabbard. Dismount. The moment their boots hit the ground, a single rifle shot cracked through the gorge. Haskins dropped. No cry. Just folded like a sack of grain. Eli hit the dirt, eyes wild. Sam screamed, fired blindly into the rocks. The echo turned it into a storm. Another shot. Sam's hat flew from his head. The third sent him sprawling, blood seeping through his shoulder. He whimpered, clawing at the dust. Silence. Eli lay flat, heart hammering. Then her voice. Above him. Behind him. Nowhere and everywhere. You left my husband in the fire. Eli spun, firing at shadows. You ain't real. No answer. Only the sound of boots crunching gravel. Eli scrambled behind a boulder, panting. He pulled a flask from his coat, took a long swig. His fingers trembled. Memories came unbidden. A woman's scream at Dry Creek, the barn burning, a figure dragging a body into the wheat. He'd laughed that night. Laughed as they rode away. Now she was hunting him through the bones of the earth. Above, vultures circled. He dragged Sam's body in front of him, using it for cover, and ran, half staggered, toward the canyon mouth. A shot rang out, tore through Sam's corpse and grazed Eli's thigh. He screamed, fell, and rolled into a gully. Behind him, the wind whispered again. Only this time, it sounded like boots. Later, miles away, the widow stood beneath a twisted pine, brushing dust from her gloves. At her feet, a bloodied patch of trail. A single boot with a silver-inlaid spur. Not his. Not yet. Back in town, Mathers hammered boards across the saloon windows. Sheriff Danton watched from his office, white as ash. He's coming, Mathers muttered. He alone. No. He pointed to the horizon. She ride with ghosts. The town bell clanged once. A flat, crooked note that rang over Larkspur Ridge like a bad omen. Eli Kane rode in alone, dragging one leg, hat low, blood dried in the seam of his pants. His revolver swung low on his hip, untouched. The streets were empty, windows shuttered, chairs tipped on their sides as if the town had held its breath and vanished. Dust spiraled through the silence. He stopped at the center of the street, just outside Harlan's saloon, eyes scanning the windows. I know you're here, he growled. Come out. A creak. Boot steps. She walked from the chapel doors with the sun behind her like firelight. The veil was gone. So were the gloves. Her hands bore calluses, scars, and one long burn across the wrist that looked like it came from a branding iron. Eli stared. You're just, Widow, she finished. That's what you made me. He laughed once. Dry. You think this is justice? This is suicide. She didn't answer. Just unbuttoned the coat draped over her shoulders and let it fall. Beneath it, a worn blue Union cavalry jacket, metal pinned to the breast. Twin revolvers sat on her hips like iron promises. Eli's hand twitched. Hers didn't. The wind shifted. Then came a draw. 2 shots. 1. Eli's pistol flying from his hand. 2. His knee exploding in red. He dropped, howling, hand clamped to his leg. Damn you. She walked toward him, boots slow, steady, clicking like a metronome for death. You burned my land, she said, voice level. Shot my husband. Left him in the ash. I didn't know, he gasped. I didn't know who he was. You didn't care. She stopped just short of him. Eli clawed at the dirt. Please, he rasped. It was war. It was survival. No, she said, lowering one pistol. It was cowardice. He looked up. What are you then? She knelt, met his eyes. I was a soldier, then a wife. Now, she stood again. Now I bury ghosts. Her revolver clicked, but she didn't fire. Instead, she turned, holstered the pistol, and walked away. Behind her, Eli Kane sobbed into the dirt. She passed Sheriff Danton on the porch. He didn't speak, only tipped his hat with shaking fingers. Mathers met her at the edge of town with his horse already saddled. She mounted without a word, the wind tugging at her coat. Where to now? He asked. She glanced west, wherever the fire hasn't reached yet. She rode off, trailing dust. Later, around campfires and in backroom saloons, folks told of the widow who wore a soldier's coat and carried a sack of boots. They said she only showed her hands before the end. And some swear, if you listen close in the canyons, you'll still hear her boots echo. One step for every soul she put in the ground.